Alright, this one is a long website. It's got a lot to say, and I am agreeing with it a great deal. This is paganlore.com. The differences in traditional witchcraft and neo-paganism, witchcraft, or Wicca. This came up, it does talk about New Age theologies in there, and so I wanted to include this. Okay, and this is talking about the differences between traditional witchcraft and what we call Wicca or Wiccan witchcraft. So let's get started. Neo-pagan witchcraft, or Wicca, had its inception in the 1940s and 1950s with the writings of Gerald Gardner. Gardner seems to have discovered a traditional coven that met in south of England and became inducted into their ranks. His own oaths of secrecy to them, however, prevented him from revealing their practices. When he went public, he was forced to write, embellish, and import occult information to make up for what he could not reveal. And this is what became Gardnerian Wicca. There is no doubt that old Gerald was associated with the likes of famous Aleister Crowley and was influenced by ceremonial magic through the OTO, the Golden Dawn, and Masonry. We know of certain that Gardner was also associated with groups of occultists called the Fellowship of Crotona, and by his own description of them, they seem to have been a loosely confederated group of Masons, Hermetics, Rastafarians, and occultists, not actual traditional witches. The record of their activities and their belief practices bears witness to this. It is rumored that this organization had tendency towards and ambitions of reviving the old craft, but this places them in the category of Reconstructionist pagans and not traditional Wiccans. Wicca, in its most Wicca, in its most modern creed and ritual structure, very strongly resembles a de-Christianized version of the Order of the Golden Dawn, with many themelic and theosophical imports, as well as obvious loan material from Aleister Crowley and the OTO. All of these sources and the personalities involved flourished in the occult revival of the first half of the 20th century, and it is the middle of the 20th century that Wicca directly dates from. Wicca makes claims to be spiritually descended from the old pagan religions, but the fact is their ritual structure and theology does not have a strong historical resemblance to any traditional European pagan culture. There's been a lot of people that said that Wicca is not Celtic paganism, and this is true. And, I have always stressed that if you're going to follow a pagan path, you can follow whichever path you want as long as you have some historical structure to it. And right here it says that Wicca does not have a strong historical resemblance to any traditional European pagan culture. So Wicca is New Age. It does not have a place in paganism. You can send your hate mail now. Traditional witchcraft, on the other hand, refers to the beliefs and practices of crafter families, individuals, and underground organizations that predate the 20th century. Normally, although the lore and practices of traditional witchcraft may have run in very early times, the farthest back in time that most traditional organizations can date themselves with any accuracy is the 17th century. However, folklore and history from the 11th century and onward bears witness to practices similar to those carried out by traditional witches today. It actually dates back further than that, but please refer to What is Witchcraft for more information. Okay. Now we're going to hit the little topics, subtopics here. Formality. Wicca is a very formal structure based on the 3 degrees model of initiation, a loan from Masonry. The Wicca religion is very heretical, with specific high priestess and high priest titles and the like, and normally oriented towards the female. There are only 2 actual traditions of Wicca: Gardnerian, the original, and Alexandrian. But since the explosion of occult interest on both sides of the Atlantic, many non-aligned eclectic traditions have sprung up overnight, representing almost every culture or metaphysical bend you can think of: Celtic Wicca, Fairy Wicca, Saxon Wicca, Dianic Wicca, etc., etc. In traditional witchcraft, normally, there is no clearly defined group structure. If there is, it is only locally, and usually not as rigid as Wicca. Titles are not used nearly as much, and when they are still informal when compared to the Wiccan emphasis on titles. Traditional craft groups may have leadership, but they are as likely to be male as female, and their power as head of the group is not the power yielded by your average eclectic Wiccan high priestess. Knowledge, experience, and willingness to serve is the deciding factor for most leaders of traditional groups, not the ego-stroking, title-collecting, or power-hungry that you find in so many New Age groups. You go scroll down a whole bunch of female pagans on Facebook, and you will see that they're giving themselves titles of high priests, high priestesses, and all that. It is absolutely disgusting. The rituals and rites of Wicca also tend to be very formal and written out beforehand. While in traditional witchcraft, most rituals are spontaneous and much less structured than Wicca. There are ritual forms, yes, some very old forms, but they are very partial, very open, and simple. The inner level of the ritual has more emphasis than the outer in traditional working. The idea is it's not how you do something, but why you do something. And I think that is something that we have to go back to, honestly. In the traditional craft, a person's progress is much slower than in most forms of modern Wicca, in which a person can be a 3rd degree high priest in the space of a few months to a year or 2, or even faster if they get their hands on an instant witch book published by Llewellyn. Living life, learning, and experience are crucial and genuine progress. The actual initiations are generally experiences that happen on a personal level, given by otherworldly powers over time. The traditional craft accepts this. Okay, I dwell on this a lot, that there are so many of these 13 or something girls out there that are claiming to be high priestesses and all that, and they attended a weekend seminar, they've read a book, and all of a sudden they can teach draconic Wicca, I'm sorry. And, you know, this is right here telling you, you can't be a high priestess at 18 years old because you haven't lived, you haven't experienced. Life is how you learn, not from sticking your nose in a damn book, especially one written by Llewellyn. New Age theology. Eclectic Wicca has many New Age concepts within its canon that simply have no place in the historical or cultural context of European old craft. Some of these are listed below. Karma. This Hindu Buddhist concept was carried into Wicca by Gardner, probably from theosophical sources, such as Helena Blavatsky. In traditional craft, fate is an important concept, but karma is unheard of. There is no belief in traditional craft of karmic debt or of karmic weight in actions. The actual traditional craft belief on these matters was and is very different than the European concept of karma. So if you do something bad, you don't owe anybody anything. The Threefold Law. This strange notion has no basis in history, nor does it hold up to sober reality well. Let me reread that for you people. The Threefold Law. This strange notion has no basis in history, nor does it hold up to sober reality well. While many people in many times and places have politically threatened people with ideas of their actions returning to visit them many times over, Wicca accepts this as an immutable physical law. The truth is, while most Wiccans have given up the belief in hellfire and damnation as a deterrent to their negative actions, they have replaced it with this threefold law, which threatens 3 times retribution for negativity. No belief such as this exists in historical traditional craft or in any surviving native European metaphysical system. Okay? So, we got to get rid of this threefold law and karma because it doesn't work. It's New Age. It's not pagan. Duotheism. The Wiccan belief system states that there are only 2 divine beings, a god and a goddess. And many different gods and goddesses worshipped by our ancient European ancestors, or anyone else on earth for that matter, are thought to be aspects or manifestations of these 2 individuals. Thus, all gods are one god and all goddesses are one goddess. This divine reductionism is referred to as Duotheism and is not a traditional witch belief. It is, in fact, a very modern belief. Furthermore, many Wiccans believe that this god and goddess to be themselves aspects of an unknown divine entity or a greater being, sometimes called the One, leading us essentially straight to a new version of monotheism, well suited to ease the consciences of the usually ex-Christian converts to Wicca. I am a Celtic believer. I have many gods and goddesses. I have 20 Celtic god statues that I've been making. I have more in my mind ready to go. I believe that each god and goddess is unique, is special. I don't go and say, hey, all these goddesses are just one aspect of one, because I don't believe in that crap. Our European ancestors were polytheists. They believed in many gods or in local gods. This is true for most traditional witches. There are some beliefs now, and in ancient times as well, of some divinities being greater than others, almost to the philosophical point of transcendence and universal power. This sometimes appears in traditional craft as well, but in the forms of mystery and not everyday devotion or New Agey monotheism. The Book of Shadows. In Wicca, maybe the Book of Shadows is a real thing, but in the olden days, amongst traditional practitioners of the secret craft, to have written evidence of what you've been doing was a death sentence if you were caught. Also, most people back then were quite illiterate. The old craft was mostly passed down orally, and if it was written down, it had been written down sparingly. So all these people that say they have these old grimoires and books of shadows are generally full of shit. You can use one now because times have changed, but the Book of Shadows is New Age. Ethics. God, this is going to be fun. The Wiccan religion has a reed or a golden rule which forms the basis of the Wiccan ethics. It states, as long as you harm none, do as you will. This is a good suggestion and basically a rewording of the Judeo-Christian golden rule. However, the traditional craft has no such rule. Ethics in the old craft are completely ambiguous and situational. Wiccans treat this reed as though it was an immutable cosmic law, when in reality the word reed is Anglo-Saxon for advice, not law. But to the Wiccan religion, it is an unmovable piece of dogma. This whole issue turns out to be another New Age Wiccan and modern human denial of the darkness inherent to nature, which I will discuss later. Harming and hurting, these things exist in nature, and we humans are part of nature. Thus, this is part of us. You harm plants and animals when you eat them. You harm bacteria in water you drink. Life feeds on life. The traditional craft is very family and faith-oriented, and if someone threatens the family or the faith, then stopping that threat is first and foremost. The warrior, yes. If that means harming someone, that's what traditional witches will do, and there is no ethical injunction against it. The craft and the power it invokes is not good or bad, it is both. There is a time and a place for both. This is hard for New Agers to understand, but it is simply the way of things. To deny either side of yourself or of nature is to move away from the central mystery that of wholeness. I have been preaching this for years. Yes. Okay.